At the entrance of a multi-million-dollar country club boardroom, a plainly dressed black single dad stood silent while millionaire Ariana Whitmore mocked him publicly. He had calmly stated he was the legitimate heir. She laughed loud, called him delusional, filmed him on her phone, and ordered security to throw him out. Caleb Richardson did not argue back. He did not explain. He only stood still, enduring every contemptuous stare. But when the board of directors stepped forward to confirm his inheritance rights, Ariana's face went pale instantly. Who exactly was this quiet man? 3 days before that humiliating confrontation, Caleb Richardson had been in his workshop sanding down a mahogany bookshelf when the envelope arrived. It was thick cream paper, expensive. The return address read Lakewood Country Club, established 1952. He turned it over in his calloused hands, wood dust settling on the wax seal. He had not heard that name spoken aloud in 25 years. Inside was a formal letter from a law firm he did not recognize. The language was careful, legal, cold. It requested his presence at an emergency board meeting on the 73rd anniversary of the club's founding. It mentioned his father's name once, Marcus Richardson. It did not explain why. It did not ask if he would come. It simply stated the date, the time, and the location. Caleb read it twice, then set it on his workbench and went back to sanding. That evening, his daughter Jasmine came home from her college prep class, carrying textbooks and a bag of groceries. She was 17, bright-eyed, careful with money, thoughtful in ways that reminded him of her late mother. She set the bag down on the kitchen counter and started unpacking vegetables for dinner. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching her move around the small kitchen with easy familiarity. She glanced over her shoulder and smiled at him. She asked if he was hungry yet. He said he was. She told him she was making stir-fry and that he should sit down and rest. He did not tell her about the letter. He did not tell her about the country club or the name Richardson or the inheritance that had been locked away for decades. Instead, he sat at the table and watched his daughter chop bell peppers with the same steady hands he had taught her to use when she was 12. They ate together in comfortable silence. Afterward, she asked if he had any plans for the weekend. He said he might have a meeting to attend. She nodded and said she hoped it went well. The next morning, Caleb pulled an old box from the top shelf of his closet. Inside was a single photograph, yellowed at the edges. It showed a tall black man in a tailored suit standing in front of a sprawling country club with white columns and manicured lawns. The man's hand rested on the shoulder of a young boy, around 10 years old. The boy was smiling. The man was not. On the back of the photograph, in faded ink, someone had written Marcus and Caleb, summer of 1993. Caleb stared at the image for a long time. His father had built that place with his own money, his own vision, his own refusal to accept that certain doors were meant to stay closed. Marcus Richardson had been one of the first black men in the state to own and operate a members-only club that catered to wealthy families, both black and white. It had been revolutionary. It had also been dangerous. By the time Caleb was 10, his father's marriage to Victoria Richardson, a white woman from old money, had fractured under the weight of scandal and betrayal. When the truth came out that Caleb was not Victoria's son but the child of another woman, Marcus's first love, everything collapsed. Victoria used her family's influence to erase Caleb from every record. She had his name removed from school rosters, medical files, even birthday cards that had been sent to the club. She told Marcus that if he ever tried to claim the boy publicly, she would destroy him in court and take the club with her. Marcus had no choice. He sent Caleb and his mother away. He gave them money, a new name, a new life, far from the spotlight. He told his son to stay quiet, stay safe, and wait. One day, he said, the truth would come back around. Caleb put the photograph back in the box. He had not seen his father since the year 2000. Marcus had died 3 years ago from lung cancer, alone in a hospital 2 states away. Caleb had not gone to the funeral. He had not known there was one. On the morning of the meeting, Caleb dressed in a plain white button-down shirt and old khaki pants. He did not own a suit. He did not bring a briefcase or a lawyer or any documents to prove who he was. He simply drove to Lakewood Country Club in his 15-year-old truck and parked in the visitor lot. The building looked exactly as it did in the photograph. White columns, manicured lawns, a fountain in the center of the circular driveway, wealth, old and unbothered. He walked through the front entrance and approached the reception desk. A young woman in a crisp uniform looked up at him with polite disinterest. He could see her eyes travel from his worn shoes to his unshaven face. She smiled, the kind of smile people use when they are already planning to say no. Caleb spoke before she could ask if he was lost. His voice was low and calm. He told her his name was Caleb Richardson. He told her he was there to claim his inheritance. The receptionist blinked. She asked if he had an appointment. He said he had received a letter. She asked if he had identification or documentation. He said he did not. She picked up the phone and spoke quietly to someone on the other end. Her tone shifted. She set the phone down and told him to wait in the lobby. She did not offer him a seat. She did not offer water. She simply turned back to her computer screen. Caleb stood near the entrance with his hands in his pockets. Around him, club members in expensive activewear and golf visors passed by without a second glance. A few stared. One woman whispered to her companion and laughed softly. Caleb did not react. He had learned a long time ago that silence was a kind of armor. You could not be humiliated if you refused to defend yourself. You could not be broken if you never tried to fight back. That was when Ariana Whitmore appeared. She came down the marble staircase from the second floor, her heels clicking sharply against the stone. She was striking in the way that wealth often made people striking, with tailored clothing and perfect posture and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She had been a rising power in the club for years, the second largest shareholder, the woman everyone assumed would eventually take full control once the Richardson estate was officially dissolved. She had spent decades building that assumption into reality. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked directly at Caleb. Her expression was not curious, it was annoyed. She walked toward him with the kind of confidence people develop when they have never been told no. She stopped 3 feet away and crossed her arms. She asked the receptionist what was going on. The receptionist hesitated, then gestured toward Caleb. She said he claimed to be a Richardson. She said he was here for the board meeting. Ariana turned her full attention to Caleb. She looked him up and down, slowly, deliberately. Then she laughed. It was not a polite laugh. It was loud and dismissive and meant to be heard by everyone in the lobby. She asked if he was joking. She said the Richardson family had been gone for decades. She said there was no heir, no claim, no possible way he could be telling the truth. She pulled out her phone and opened the camera. She told Caleb he must be delusional. She asked if he realized how pathetic he looked. Caleb said nothing. He simply stood there and met her eyes. His silence seemed to irritate her more than any argument could have. She took a step closer and raised her voice. She said she knew his type. She said she knew men like him showed up at places like this all the time, pretending to be someone important, hoping to scam their way into money they did not earn. She told him to leave before she called security. She told him he was embarrassing himself. Caleb spoke only once. His voice was steady and quiet. He said he did not need her to believe him. He said he only needed the board to do their job. Ariana stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned to the receptionist and told her to call security immediately. She said she wanted this man removed from the property. She said she wanted it done now. Security arrived within 2 minutes. 2 men in dark uniforms and radios clipped to their belts walked through the lobby with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested they had done this before. Ariana pointed at Caleb without looking at him. She told them to escort this man off the property. She said he was trespassing. She said he was attempting fraud. One of the guards asked Caleb if he had been invited. Caleb said he had received a letter. The guard asked to see it. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded envelope. The guard unfolded the letter and read it slowly. His expression did not change. He handed it back to Caleb and looked at his partner. The second guard shrugged. Ariana stepped forward and snatched the letter from Caleb's hand before he could put it away. She scanned it quickly, her eyes moving fast across the lines. Then she laughed again, louder this time. She held the letter up for the small crowd that had begun to gather in the lobby. She said it was obviously forged. She said anyone could print something like this at home. She tore the letter in half, then in half again, and dropped the pieces on the marble floor at Caleb's feet. Caleb looked down at the torn paper. He did not bend to pick it up. He did not speak. He simply stood there with his hands loose at his sides. Ariana turned to the growing crowd and raised her voice so everyone could hear. She said this was exactly the kind of person who tried to exploit the Richardson name. She said it happened all the time, people showing up with fake documents and invented stories, hoping to get a payout. She said it was disgusting. She said it was an insult to the legacy of the club. Someone in the crowd asked who Caleb was supposed to be. Ariana turned back to him with a cruel smile. She said he claimed to be Marcus Richardson's son. The crowd murmured. A few people laughed. One man said Marcus Richardson never had a son. Another said the Richardson line had ended years ago. Ariana nodded as if their reactions proved her point. She told Caleb he should be ashamed of himself. She told him he was making a fool of himself in front of people who actually mattered. Caleb still did not respond. His silence seemed to unsettle her. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to something sharper, more personal. She asked him if he really thought anyone would believe a black single dad in cheap clothes could be the heir to a multi-million-dollar estate. She asked him if he had any idea how ridiculous he looked. She asked him what kind of desperate situation he must be in to come here and humiliate himself like this. Caleb met her eyes but said nothing. His face was calm, almost blank, as if he had heard worse before and survived it. Ariana pulled out her phone again. This time she opened a live streaming app. She held the camera up and began recording, speaking directly to her followers. She said she was at Lakewood Country Club and there was a man trying to scam his way into the Richardson inheritance. She turned the camera toward Caleb. She told her audience to look at him. She said this was what fraud looked like. She said this was what happened when people got too comfortable lying. The comments started flooding in immediately. Hundreds of people watching in real time, typing reactions, sharing the video. One of the security guards shifted uncomfortably. He told Ariana that maybe they should let the board handle this inside. Ariana ignored him. She kept filming. She asked Caleb directly if he had anything to say for himself. She asked if he wanted to apologize now or wait until the police arrived. Caleb did not look at the camera. He looked past her, toward the closed doors of the boardroom at the far end of the lobby. He could see movement through the frosted glass, shadows of people sitting around a long table. The board was already in session. Ariana followed his gaze and her expression hardened. She told the guards to take him outside now. She said she did not want him anywhere near that room. One of the guards reached for Caleb's arm. Caleb did not resist, but he did not move either. The guard hesitated. There was something in the way Caleb stood, the stillness of him, that made force feel wrong. The guard looked at his partner. The second guard looked at Ariana. Ariana's face flushed with frustration. She told them to do their job. Before anyone could move, the boardroom doors opened. An older woman stepped out, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, her suit immaculate. She looked at the crowd, then at Ariana, then at Caleb. Her name was Eleanor Frost, and she had been the board's chairwoman for over a decade. She was a lawyer by training, precise and unsentimental, someone who built her reputation on never making assumptions. She walked toward the group with measured steps. She asked what was happening. Ariana immediately turned to her, relief flooding her voice. She explained that this man had shown up claiming to be a Richardson. She said he had forged documents. She said he was clearly trying to disrupt the board meeting. She gestured to the torn letter on the floor. Eleanor looked down at the pieces of paper, then back at Caleb. She asked him if he was Caleb Richardson. He said he was. She asked if he had received an official summons from the firm of Dalton and Pierce. He said he had. Eleanor nodded slowly. She told the security guards to step back. Ariana's face tightened. She asked Eleanor what she was doing. Eleanor said she was doing her job. She said the board had been expecting someone to respond to the summons. She said that response was legally required before the Richardson estate could be dissolved. Ariana argued that there was no heir. She said everyone knew that. She said Marcus Richardson had died without any legitimate children. Eleanor corrected her. She said Marcus Richardson had died without any publicly acknowledged children. She said that was not the same thing. The crowd went quiet. Ariana stared at Eleanor. She asked if Eleanor was seriously suggesting this man might be telling the truth. Eleanor said she was not suggesting anything. She said the board would determine the truth based on the evidence presented. She told Ariana to return to the boardroom. Ariana did not move. She said this was insane. She said they were wasting time on a con artist. Eleanor's voice remained calm but firm. She told Ariana that if she continued to interfere with board proceedings, she would be removed from the meeting. Ariana's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around at the crowd, at the phones still recording, at the security guards who were now standing farther back. She looked at Caleb, who had not moved, had not spoken, had not reacted to anything she had said or done. His silence was unbearable to her. She turned and walked back toward the boardroom, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She stopped at the door and looked back at Eleanor. She said this was a mistake. She said Eleanor would regret it. Then she disappeared inside. Eleanor turned to Caleb. She asked him to follow her. He walked behind her through the lobby, past the whispers and the stares, past the phones still recording his every step. They entered the boardroom together. It was a long space with dark wood paneling and portraits of past presidents lining the walls. At the far end of the table sat 6 people, all dressed in business attire, all watching him with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. Ariana was already seated near the head of the table, her arms crossed, her expression cold. Eleanor gestured to an empty chair at the opposite end. Caleb sat down. She took her place at the head of the table and opened a leather folder in front of her. She began by stating the purpose of the meeting. The board was convened to address the final disposition of the Richardson estate, which had been held in legal trust for 25 years. According to the terms of Marcus Richardson's will, the estate could only be transferred to a legitimate heir who presented themselves in person on the 73rd anniversary of the club's founding. Today was that day. She asked Caleb if he understood. He said he did. Eleanor asked him to state his full name for the record. He said his name was Caleb James Richardson. She asked for his date of birth. He gave it. She asked where he was born. He said he was born in this city, at Mercy General Hospital, on the 14th of March, 1983. Eleanor made notes. One of the board members, a man in his 60s with graying hair, leaned forward. He asked Caleb if he had any documentation to support his claim. Caleb said he did not. The man frowned. He said that made things difficult. Ariana seized the opportunity. She said it made things impossible. She said without documentation, there was no proof. She said they were wasting time on a fantasy. She looked around the table, appealing to the others. She reminded them that Marcus Richardson's marriage to Victoria had produced no children. She said Marcus had no other recorded relationships. She said the idea that he had a secret son was absurd. She said they should vote now to dissolve the estate and move forward. Several board members nodded. One woman said it seemed reasonable. Another man said they had a responsibility to the club's future. Eleanor raised her hand. She said they would not be voting yet. She said there were procedures to follow. Ariana's jaw tightened. She asked what procedures. Eleanor said the will contained specific instructions for verifying the heir's identity. She said those instructions were unusual but legally binding. She said the board was required to follow them exactly. Ariana demanded to know what the instructions were. Eleanor said she would reveal them at the appropriate time. For now, she said, they needed to hear from Caleb directly. She asked Caleb to tell them about his relationship with Marcus Richardson. Caleb spoke quietly. He said Marcus was his father. He said his mother had been Marcus's first love, before Victoria. He said Marcus had acknowledged him privately but could not do so publicly because of Victoria's threats. He said he had been sent away as a child to protect both him and his mother. He said he had not seen his father since the year 2000. He said he had not known about the will until 3 days ago. One of the board members asked why he had never come forward before. Caleb said he had been told to wait. He said his father had promised him that one day the truth would be safe to tell. The board member asked if he had any proof of that promise. Caleb said he did not. Another member asked if anyone could corroborate his story. Caleb said his mother had passed away 8 years ago. He said there was no one left who knew the full truth except the people in this room. Ariana stood up. She said this was exactly what she had warned them about. She said Caleb was telling a convenient story with no evidence, no witnesses, and no documentation. She said he was counting on their sympathy to override their common sense. She said if they allowed this, they would be setting a dangerous precedent. She said anyone could walk in off the street and claim to be a Richardson. She said the club would become a target for every con artist in the state. She said they needed to vote now, before this went any further. Eleanor looked at Caleb. She asked him if he had anything else to say. Caleb looked around the table. He saw doubt in most of their faces. He saw anger in Ariana's. He saw something else in the eyes of one man sitting near the far end, an older man with deep-set eyes and hands that trembled slightly on the table. The man was staring at Caleb as if he were seeing a ghost. Caleb held his gaze for a moment, then looked back at Eleanor. He said he had nothing else to say. He said he had told the truth. He said that would have to be enough. Eleanor nodded. She said the board would deliberate. She asked Caleb to wait outside. He stood and walked back through the boardroom doors. The lobby was still full of people. They stared at him as he passed. Someone whispered that he looked guilty. Someone else said he looked broke. Caleb found a chair near the window and sat down. He waited. Inside the boardroom, the tension was immediate. Ariana did not wait for Eleanor to speak. She said they had wasted enough time already. She said the vote should be simple. She said there was no credible evidence that Caleb Richardson was who he claimed to be. She said the estate should be dissolved and the assets redistributed according to the secondary provisions of the will. She looked around the table, her voice firm and confident. She said she moved to call the vote. One of the younger board members, a woman in her 40s with sharp features, agreed. She said they could not make decisions based on stories. She said, without documentation, without witnesses, without any verifiable proof, they had nothing to go on. Another member nodded. He said the liability alone was too great. He said if they transferred the estate to the wrong person, the legal consequences could destroy the club. Ariana smiled. She said exactly. She said this was not about being cruel. She said it was about being responsible. But the older man at the far end of the table had not spoken yet. His name was Harold Mitchell, and he had been a member of the club since 1978. He had known Marcus Richardson personally. They had played golf together, attended fundraisers together, argued about politics and business over scotch in the lounge. Harold had watched Marcus build the club into something extraordinary. He had also watched Marcus suffer when his marriage fell apart. He leaned forward now, his voice rough with age but steady. He said they were missing something. Eleanor looked at him. She asked what he meant. Harold said Caleb's face. He said there was something about the way Caleb carried himself, the shape of his eyes, the set of his jaw. He said it reminded him of Marcus in a way that could not be faked. He said he had seen Marcus stand exactly like that 30 years ago when the club's founding members tried to force him out. He said Marcus had not argued. He had not shouted. He had simply stood there and waited for the truth to prove itself. Harold said Caleb had done the same thing today. Ariana dismissed him immediately. She said resemblance meant nothing. She said memory was unreliable, especially at Harold's age. She said they could not make a multi-million-dollar decision based on someone's feeling. Harold looked at her with something close to pity. He said she was right that feelings were not enough. He said that was why they should look at the will. He said Marcus had been a careful man. He said if Marcus had written specific instructions for verifying an heir, those instructions were there for a reason. Eleanor opened the red leather folder that had been sitting in front of her since the meeting began. Inside was a document sealed in plastic, dated 1999, signed and notarized by witnesses who were no longer alive. She said the will was clear. She said Marcus Richardson had anticipated this exact situation. She said he had known his son would eventually come forward. She said he had also known that son would face exactly the kind of scrutiny and disbelief they had witnessed today. That was why the verification process was built into the will itself. Ariana demanded to know what the verification process was. Eleanor said it was a test. She said Marcus had designed it to determine whether his son had the strength and dignity to inherit not just wealth but responsibility. She said the test was simple. The heir had to appear in person on the specified date. He had to identify himself without the help of lawyers or representatives. He had to endure doubt and hostility without defending himself aggressively. He had to prove he could stand firm in the face of humiliation and still choose silence over spectacle. Eleanor looked around the table. She said Caleb Richardson had done exactly that. The room went silent. Ariana stared at Eleanor. She asked if Eleanor was seriously suggesting that Marcus Richardson had intentionally set up his son to be humiliated. Eleanor said that was exactly what Marcus had done. She said Marcus knew the world his son would inherit. He knew it would not respect him easily. He knew people would question his legitimacy, his background, his right to be there. Marcus wanted to know if his son could survive that and still have the grace not to retaliate. She said that kind of strength was rare. She said Marcus had bet everything that his son would have it. Ariana's voice rose. She said this was insane. She said they could not possibly accept this. She said there was no proof Caleb had passed any test. She said all he had done was stand there and say nothing. She said that was not strength. She said that was just stubbornness or stupidity or fear. She said they were being manipulated. She looked at Harold. She looked at the other board members. She said if they went along with this, they would be making the biggest mistake in the club's history. Eleanor asked Ariana to sit down. Ariana did not sit down. She said she would not be silent while they handed over everything she had worked for to a stranger. Eleanor's expression hardened. She said Ariana had worked for nothing. She said Ariana was a shareholder, not an heir. She said Ariana had no legal claim to the Richardson estate. She said the only reason Ariana had assumed control was because there had been no legitimate heir present. Now there was. Ariana's face flushed. She said Eleanor was out of line. Eleanor said Ariana was out of time. Eleanor stood and walked to the door. She opened it and called for Caleb to come back inside. He entered the room and took his seat again. Eleanor returned to her place at the head of the table. She looked at Caleb and told him the board had reviewed the terms of his father's will. She said the will contained a verification process that required the heir to demonstrate certain qualities of character. She said the board had observed his conduct today. She said they had seen him endure public ridicule, false accusations, and deliberate humiliation without retaliating or abandoning his claim. She said that was exactly what Marcus Richardson had hoped to see. Eleanor opened the sealed document and read aloud. The language was formal, but the meaning was unmistakable. Marcus Richardson acknowledged Caleb James Richardson as his biological son, born of his relationship with a woman named Clara Hayes, before his marriage to Victoria. He stated that Caleb had been sent away to protect him from scandal and harm. He stated that Caleb was the sole legitimate heir to the Richardson estate, including all property, assets, and controlling shares of Lakewood Country Club. He stated that Caleb's inheritance would only be valid if he presented himself in person, without legal representation, and withstood public doubt without aggression or deception. The final line read, "If my son can endure what I endured and remain a good man, then he deserves everything I built." Harold Mitchell closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. He said Marcus had been right. He said Caleb had passed the test. He said the vote was clear. One by one, the other board members nodded. The woman who had been skeptical earlier said she was satisfied. The man who had worried about liability said he was convinced. Even the younger members, who had been hesitant, agreed. Eleanor said the board would now take a formal vote to confirm Caleb Richardson as the legitimate heir and transfer all rights and assets accordingly. She asked if there were any objections. Ariana stood abruptly. She said she objected. She said this was fraud. She said they were all being deceived. She said she would take legal action. She said she would expose this entire proceeding. Eleanor said Ariana was welcome to pursue legal action if she wished. She said the will had been notarized, witnessed, and filed with the state. She said it had been reviewed by 3 independent law firms. She said it was ironclad. She said Ariana had no standing to challenge it. Ariana's hands were shaking. She said this was not over. Eleanor said it was. Eleanor called for the vote. Every board member except Ariana raised their hand in favor. Eleanor recorded the result. She said the motion passed. She said Caleb Richardson was now confirmed as the majority shareholder of Lakewood Country Club, with 51% ownership and full voting rights. She said all decisions regarding the club's future would now require his approval. She said the transfer was effective immediately. She looked at Caleb. She asked if he understood. He said he did. Ariana grabbed her bag and walked toward the door. Eleanor stopped her. She said there was one more matter to address. She said the board had reviewed video footage from the lobby. She said Ariana's conduct had violated multiple club policies. She said Ariana had publicly harassed a shareholder, destroyed legal documents, and used her position to intimidate security staff into acting improperly. She said Ariana's membership was suspended immediately, pending a formal ethics review. She said Ariana's voting rights as a shareholder were revoked until further notice. She said Ariana was required to leave the premises. Ariana turned around. Her face was pale. She looked at Eleanor, then at the other board members, then at Caleb. She said they were making a mistake. She said they would regret this. She said Caleb had no idea how to run a place like this. She said he would destroy everything within a year. Caleb finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried. He said he had no intention of destroying anything. He said he had no intention of revenge. He said he only intended to honor his father's memory by doing what his father would have done. He said that meant treating people with fairness, even people who had treated him poorly. Ariana stared at him. She seemed to be searching for something to say, some final argument or insult that would undo what had just happened. But there was nothing left. She turned and walked out of the boardroom. The door closed behind her. The remaining board members sat in silence for a moment. Then Harold stood and walked over to Caleb. He extended his hand. He said he was sorry. He said he should have recognized Caleb sooner. He said he should have defended him in the lobby. Caleb shook his hand. He said there was nothing to apologize for. He said Harold had done exactly what was needed when it mattered most. Eleanor asked Caleb if he had any questions. He asked what happened next. She said there would be paperwork to sign, accounts to transfer, meetings to schedule. She said it would take time to transition everything properly. She said the club was in good financial health, but there were challenges ahead. She said membership had been declining. She said younger families were not joining the way they used to. She said the club needed vision and leadership. She asked if Caleb was ready for that. He said he did not know. He said he would try. One of the board members asked what Caleb did for a living. He said he worked with wood. He said he built furniture and repaired broken things. The board member smiled. He said that was a good skill to have. He said the club had plenty of broken things that needed repair. Caleb nodded. He said he had noticed. Eleanor said the board would support him however they could. She said Marcus had chosen well. She said they would honor that choice. Caleb thanked her. He stood and shook hands with each board member. Then he left the room. The lobby was empty now. The crowd had dispersed. The phones had stopped recording. The security guards were gone. Caleb walked through the silent space and out the front doors. The afternoon sun was bright and warm. He stood on the steps for a moment, looking at the fountain, the manicured lawns, the white columns. It looked the same as it had in the photograph. It looked the same as it had in his memory, but it felt different now. It felt like something he was responsible for. He drove home in his old truck. When he pulled into the driveway, he saw the lights on inside the house. He walked through the front door and found Jasmine in the kitchen. She was setting the table for dinner. She looked up and smiled at him. She asked how the meeting went. He said it went well. She asked if he was hungry. He said he was. She told him to sit down. She said she had made something special. They sat together at the small table. She had cooked pasta with vegetables and garlic bread. It was simple and warm and exactly what he needed. She talked about her day, about a test she had aced, about a college application she had submitted. He listened and asked questions and felt the weight of the day begin to lift. She did not ask about the country club. She did not ask about the inheritance. She only asked if he was okay. He said he was. He said he was better than okay. After dinner, they washed dishes together. She told him she was proud of him. He asked why. She said she did not know exactly. She said she just had a feeling that he had done something important today. He dried his hands on a towel and put his arm around her shoulders. He said she was right. He said he had done something important. He said he had kept a promise. She asked what promise. He said a promise to be the kind of man his father had hoped he would be. She smiled and said she thought he already was. That night, Caleb sat in his workshop. He turned on the lamp and looked at the half-finished bookshelf. He picked up the sandpaper and went back to work. The wood was smooth under his hands. The rhythm was familiar. He thought about his father standing in front of the club in 1993. He thought about the boy in the photograph who had no idea what was coming. He thought about the man he had become, the silence he had learned, the strength it had taken to endure. He thought about Ariana's face when the truth came out. He thought about Harold's tears. He thought about Eleanor's steady voice reading the will. He thought about the question his father had asked without words. Can you stand in the face of contempt and not become contemptuous yourself? Can you be doubted and not lose faith? Can you be humiliated and still choose grace? Caleb had not known the answer until today, but now he did. The answer was yes. The answer had always been yes. He set down the sandpaper and turned off the lamp. Tomorrow he would go back to the club. Tomorrow he would begin the work of rebuilding what his father had started. But tonight, he was just a man in a workshop, a father in a small house, a son who had finally come home.